Welcome back to Cultures Campus. How the industry keeps beating. Now we're ready for our next panel discussion. It's called Adaptability, Finding Value Online. I want to remind you that we have our official hashtag, Cultures Campus 2020, and you're more than welcome to use it on any social platform that you wish. So our speakers for today are Jennifer Gordon, Director of Center for Creative Business Innovation. I'm sure that you remember her from the morning. Then Gaëtane Verna, who has been the director of the Power Plant Contemporary Art Gallery since 2012. She's also the president of the board of directors of the Toronto Arts Council. Gaëtane Verna holds an international diploma in heritage administration and conservation and received a DA and a master's degree in art history, and has years of experience in art administration, creating, publishing catalogs, and organizing and presenting exhibitions. Dr. Julie Nagam is a Canada Research Chair in Indigenous Art, Collaboration and Digital Media, and is an Associate Professor in the Department of Art History at the University of Winnipeg. She is the inaugural Artistic Director for 2020 and 2021 for Nuit, Blanche, Toronto, the largest public exhibition in North America. Devyani Saltzman is a Canadian writer and curator with a deep interest in relevant multidisciplinary programming at the intersection between art, ideas, and social change. She's the director of public programming at the AGO and working across all disciplines, and was previously the director of literary arts at the Banff Center, the first woman and the first woman of color in that role, as well as founding curator at Luminato, North America's largest multi-arts festival. Guys, take it away.
Hello. Hi.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. Very honored and very excited to be here with this extremely esteemed group of women leaders in the arts, multidisciplinary leaders. Today, our panel is talking about value online and adaptability. So today we've been putting different things online and we're watching what happens and we're seeing how we adapt to them. For example, we had a comedy performance. How does the comedian perform when they can't read the audience? These are some of the questions and pieces that we move through. How do musicians perform when there are lag times and various other pieces happening? What are we doing in instances of community building activities when we can't touch each other, when we can't come close to each other? And so we're looking at a number of different pieces on best practices to share here today. As we moved online, let's have a little bit of a talk about what has been working and what has not. Has it been digital business as usual? Or did you find you had a whole new strategy that you had to put in place? Also, I just want us to keep in mind the question of value and who determines that. Who determines what has value as we move through these processes? Who determines what is seen, how it is seen, and who has access to participating in that or viewing that as well. So younger folks have a sort of inherent equal value that they place as digital natives between their online lives and their real lives. For people of a non-digitally native background, tends to have more of a value placement on their in real life. So these are some of the shifts that we're dealing with now because everyone has moved into the digital space in a much more fulsome manner in that way. So I'm going to keep the questions really simple. We only have 4 of them. Please, if the audience has any questions, go ahead and jump in, and we are looking forward to answering those as well. So for the first question, as we've moved online, what was easy? I know everyone's laughing here, right? Or was any of it easy? That may indeed be the answer, right? So Gaëtane, we'll start with you.
Sure. So first of all, thank you so much for inviting me to participate. And I'm so happy to be joined us with, two of my favorite people across the country. So it's so nice to see you from, our different homes for now. So what was it easy and what has worked? So the thing that I want to say is that I'm always incredibly, not surprised, but incredibly flabbergasted by the ability of at least my team and the art world, visual art world, to suddenly switch gear in a matter. I think we were stunned for a day or two, maybe, and then suddenly so much information was thrusted into the public. And I think as a sector, we are so in touch with the necessity to be bridges to our audience and to be the ones that like carry the work of artists to different audiences, that I think everybody, suddenly and rapidly, but not suddenly, rapidly decided to go take the task at hand and to push forward. And I would say that for me, one example was that just before COVID, the lockdown, we were supposed to hold an event on March 21st. And we spent hours discussing whether we should do it live or not live. And this was before the shutdown. And for us, it just seemed like this was not the right way of engaging in a symposium. And now, because of COVID, we flipped right around, and everyone and humans are very adaptable, and everybody adapted to this new situation. And I think that in a sense, there's good and bad. The good is that we adapted so well, but then I would say maybe the negative is maybe there's an overpopulation of content being put out there. And the last point I want to make is last Saturday we held the first of the 4 parts of what would have been a one-day symposium. We divided it on 4 Saturdays, and I was amazed that we had 70 people, and people from really truly all over the world: New Zealand, Malaysia, Pakistan, Canada, the US, Switzerland, et cetera, et cetera. So looking at that, I totally feel that we've learned something about our capacity to reach audiences outside of our usual, community.
Thank you. I'll pass the floor to you, Devyani.
It's quite similar to Gaëtane. I mean, I think we were probably out of office around March 13th, and we were about a week or two from announcing our spring summer season, which included large scale live performances for 400 people and talks, and all of that work, which had taken months, had to be put on hold. But within about probably 2 weeks or so, we had adapted to creating online channels, and now we have five a week. We have 4 talks and a AGO home stage. We migrated very quickly, and I was super impressed by the team's ability to do that and to start programming, and also just the reach increased. We're limited on site by Bailey Court being a 400 seater, and Walker Court having anywhere between 250 to 500 people watching a performance. Last Friday, Nicolas Steer, Coco Frambois, we showed a performance that was in response to Micheline Thomas's Femme Noire on AGO home stage Friday night online, and 6,000 people over 24 hours watched that performance. So it's been amazing to see the increase in numbers and engagement, and also the fluidity with which we moved into what is in essence online content creation.
So did you find that you were making new strategies, or were you able to shift some of that content straight over online?
I think initially, and in full honesty, it was transferring existing content online in terms of my portfolio, which is talks and performances. But we also had new things develop. For example, on our learning side, under the director of learning, Paola Paletto, Maker, our whole gallery school is closed, but we started online Maker videos and Maker Wednesdays. So it was a combination of new initiatives and migrating existing initiatives. In terms of overall strategy of engagement, the idea was just to feel very alive all the time. And if you look at AGO from home, there's kind of weekly content that's announced. So I think it's been a process of discovery as we go, and just a desire to create a relevant online congregation. excuse me, talking too much.
No, thank you. That's fantastic. Julie, what have you experienced? What has been easy in migrating this process? And did you need a new strategy, or has it been a straight transfer?
I think I would say a few things. One, I would say, of course, thank you, Chimigwich Marcy, for having us. And again, feeling is mutual with these powerhouses that I get to share the screen with. I'd say that there's, it's been interesting in terms of, for me as a digital media artist and somebody who works in media, and in particular, a lot of online stuff. I think that my critique would be, it's amazing to watch institutions that are actually doing this new shift, but there has been a total disconnect in a long period of time for lots of institutions. Like, we know that the digital strategies at the Canada Council was grossly underapplied for. Do you know what I mean? So I think that, you know, this round, it's not going to be a problem. I think they're probably going to have too many applications, but I think that it's exciting, just to build on what Gaëtane and Devyani are saying, is that the reach that you have is so different. So I think that that's the exciting part. And because people are all of a sudden in lockdown and forced to be at home, you know, they're craving and they want to be able to be engaged in some kind of capacity. You know, at the same time, I would say, you know, there's a screen fatigue or screen exhaustion, whatever, however you want to describe it. But the exciting part is just what they're saying in terms of the kind of global reach that you can get, and the fact that we're actually recording, archiving, and then popping that stuff back up that people can actually see after is actually really amazing, which most institutions weren't doing, or would do some stuff, or people would forget and they get distracted because they were busy going to actual events. I'd say the hardest thing for me is I'm not going to be able to pivot that well for something like Nuit Blanche. You know, it's public art in public spaces in over 1 million people. It's a, you know, I can't imagine what that's going to be or feel like differently for people if we can't gather in public space. And when I think about the importance of public space, as much as I like the pivot in terms of the online stuff, and it's true, both Powerplan and AGO, incredible job. And I'm not surprised they have got fantastic teams that all of a sudden responded like that. And I think that's great. And I think for me right now, I'm in Manitoba. And so I've been able to stay really connected and close to what's happening in Toronto and other places across the world, which I wouldn't have had the opportunity otherwise. So for me, I think that's really working. We've done a bunch of really cool stuff in terms of like book launches, webinars, live talks, like what we're doing right now, you know, and that's been a lot of fun. And it's been great to kind of engage people in a new format. Granted, it's a square box and you're like, you know, you're stuck in your little thing, but it's still better than not, right?
Fantastic. Thank you. So our next question, which you just tipped off a little bit there, was what was hard, or what was just not possible to do with the new parameters? Devyani, did you want to start?
Yes, I mean, and I'm thinking of it as the reality is it's a very different experience to be in collective public space together. And the sense of social isolation, even if we're engaging online, we might be connecting virtually, is different from being in a space and feeling connected. I think the hardest thing has been losing that. And also, I'll be very honest, capacity, like producing online programming and content. I've been producing live is challenging and involves physical setups, etc. But we're on a 3.5-day work week with 5 programs a week. It is a constant production cycle for our marketing team, our web team, our programming team. And I think we think the digital space may be easier or more fluid, but the reality is the work with artists, the work in setting up talks, the background prep, you know, we're becoming hashtag, you know, news sources / cultural spaces in a very short period of time. So I think just adapting and adjusting our energy and capacity has been difficult. And also the things you can't quite do in the virtual space in terms of how you experience dance or how you experience live music or being in front of a visual, a painting and hearing a gallery guide speak to it. So those have been the challenges.
I just want to add to what Devyani's saying, that the fact that like you can't read the audience, you know, you made the joke about a comedian, but you know, we had hundreds of people. We've been doing all these talks and it's been super great. But after, I feel really confused. Like you can't read the audience. You don't know if it was any good. And you can see in the chats, you know, people will be like, oh, that was great. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And you see the little hand raises up in the little emojis or whatever they are. And that makes you feel good. And I think that it's better, you know, to know that. But you can't all of a sudden switch where you're going because you can read the audience of what you think that they're getting out of the talk. So, you know, there's different layers to the knowledge and the things that you want to bring to the table. And a lot of times that's a back and forth and a reciprocal relationship, which is entirely lost online. You know, it is really difficult.
Yeah, there's different types of access and fluidity that are happening, but then there's also these barriers. And as you say, like you're in a box and in a bubble, and it's a bit like, where's the context here and how are we relating? And I think there's been a lot of very steep learning curves for a lot of folks in a lot of ways, right? But Gaëtane, did you have any thoughts on what was difficult or impossible to deliver?
I think that for me, you know, the relationship to artwork, any strategies that I've always believed in, you know, digital media. To jump on what Julie said before, the problem with the Canada Council grant is no one seems to understand what we can actually apply for, but we all need the money. But I think now we will have time to have understood what they really mean in the program. And I agree with you in this case. But I would say that for me, any strategy, digital strategy for my entire career has always been about creating bridges, but the end result must be to see the work in the flesh. You know, this is what I strive for, because seeing an artwork and having a physical relationship to the size of the work, to how you're feeling in front of it, how you know, if you think of your travel to an institution, your encounter with the people who say hello, you know, that whole context of getting ready to be face to face with a work of art is for me also part of your ability to engage with the work. And, you know, however you have virtual tours or anything virtual, you lose this. You can't feel your physical reaction to the artwork. And we will never be able to, the only way to do this is to be physically in front of the artwork. And then this ties into, you know, as Julie was saying, when you're in a room, you know, you can see the audience reacting with you, with their bodies, with their noddings of heads, with their you know, and then that keeps you going. There's that emotional reaction, which now is very difficult to have because we don't see the people. And then if you see everyone on a panel, then there's just way too many people, and you don't know where to focus your attention, you know. So for me, it's really, those are the things that I miss the most, and that I find that will not be replaced by any virtual thing and encounter. And, you know, yesterday I had the chance to travel to Hamilton and go to a studio visit with an artist, and to see the works and you know, to see the materiality of the works while you're kneeling down on the floor of a studio looking at an artwork and talking to an artist is a very different experience than if we were doing it, you know, through a Zoom. You know, if all else fails, we do that. But really the materiality of our engagement, our physical engagement, and of the engagement with an artwork, whether it's a painting, a drawing, a sculpture, photography, a photograph, and even in video work, you know, seeing Lisa's work does not, you know, seeing it at the AGO with the immensity of the screen is a completely, like, you can't reproduce this if you're sitting on your TV screen. Even if you have a movie theater, you have to be in the space to feel the arc of the screen, to see the images and to have that reaction. So
yeah, I'm thinking as we're all talking, and I'm thinking about the impact of the loss of scale, right? And the sort of maybe for myself, it's been a process of mourning in some way, because you do lose the ritual of, as you say, going and attending these groups and getting the interaction and that sense of community, that vibrancy that's there, and the embodiment that happens, right? So for me, if anything, it's been a bit of a struggle with being slightly disembodied, and I think that is tying into the sense of scale that you get lost when you're 2D on a screen. So it's had some advantages and disadvantages then, I think.
Can I add one quick thing which we haven't discussed in terms of challenges? It is fatigue, and not the challenges of producing events or lack of community, but even as viewers, the ability to process information, to focus, to take it into our imagination and retain. I feel like for many people who are kind of, at least their work, but some people's work have migrated to the digital space, or people attending multiple events, I don't know if we're processing in the same way. So
That's
just putting it up.
Yeah.
I think I could add in this also, which talks about accessibility, depending where you live and whether your bandwidth and your signal is good. I mean, there's things you won't be able to access in the same way that, you know, I'm downtown Toronto. I have a high-speed network. I can afford to have a high-speed network because some people cannot afford this. And then libraries are closed, and, you know, like, so for this question of accessibility for people in terms of, again, we see another element of social barriers and financial, and also what, you know, what are signals in rural areas or further areas, and the city versus all of these questions, and which neighborhood are you? Do you live in a concrete building, or are you in a house with windows? And, you know, so all these things, suddenly you also realize that this, you know, whereas if people can come to the gallery, whether they have physical disabilities and all of this, we can all still, you know, exchange on a type of same playing field, you know, type of, but with the add-on of the virtual, all those technical issues can also impact the accessibility for people.
I'm just, sorry, Jennifer, I just wanted to add on to what both of Devyani and Gaëtane are saying. It's entirely true. And I look to, you know, I'm in a rural place in rural Manitoba, and, you know, lots of Indigenous communities are in rural and remote areas, and the broadband is terrible. So then that kind of engagement is difficult. But then on the flip side, a good colleague and collaborator, Heather Gugliorte, talks about how Inuit have been actually using social media such as Facebook to communicate all the time, because in fact, it takes such a small amount of broadband. So you can actually text and talk to each other that way. And so a lot of people, because they've always been separated because of the vastness of their territory, you know, they've had to use and adapt to technologies to be able to communicate. So I think, like, I agree with all those things, and it's true. It's because it sets it up, and especially in dense urban spaces like Toronto, you know, you can see the disparity of who has access to internet and what kind and how quickly, and or the devices to actually utilize that. But then we look to rural and remote or northern communities, and it's actually a preferred way of communicating, even though they have really low broadband weight. So just wanted to add that.
That's a great point. It's almost the panel right before ours was talking about accessibility, and they were talking a lot about hacks, right? And here's an example of a hack, right? It's like, okay, everybody's using Facebook Messenger because it's super easy, doesn't take a lot of data. You can talk to each other quickly and form communities that way. So that these changes we're experiencing here, maybe in the city, may not be the same, obviously, for everyone else across the board there. Very interesting. So let's move to think about what has surprised you. Have you seen anything in the audience development or in feedback you've been receiving? Any shifts there that have surprised you in your communities, and how you've been building and how you've been working at all? Gaëtane, would you like to start? I can see your.
Well, two things. So And again, hats off to colleagues across the country. So one of my colleagues, chief curator at Contemporary Calgary, phones me on a Friday afternoon and says, I have this idea, could we create this platform, and everybody's producing art content, and could we create a platform where we become a bridge between artist practices and like sharing it across the country? And I say, yes, this is a great idea. Within, I don't know, 2 days, what I thought was going to be one institution per province and territory was like 60 institutions had signed on. And then I think 7 to 10 days, there was a new platform, and it's called Fieldtrip Art. And basically they had figured out a system that everyone would either commission different things and then share it on the platform on Instagram. And to me, I was floored by the rapidity in which all of this happened. So for me, that was, again, showing the resourcefulness of these arts community that just pulls together really quickly. The other thing that I found very interesting that makes us and pushes us to check ourselves is, especially in the aftermath of George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter, it's like how people have been using, at least I don't go on Facebook that much, but I've been on Instagram, how people were just, telling institutions and using the comments. And for me, I was reading them, even if it was like really harsh comments to other institutions, to teach us what not to do, and to understand that our audiences are really in tune, and they ask us to do better, and they say the word, and they tell us. And for me, that surprised me, the ability, not the ability, but the engagement to which level people just called out institutions about their anti-racist, policies. And also like you and I, we've read everything that's coming out in the news through, it has to do with COVID, definitely, but it also has to do with how everybody's been pushed to be so much on social media that people are using it as a vector to voice the positive and the negative and to keep us in check. And I'm thinking each time I write something, I mean, I've always been like this, but I think all of us need to be thinking of this is a real source of communication with our audience, and even audiences that don't necessarily come to our institutions use social media to be really forceful in their comments, and I would say their negative comments. And so it totally surprised me, the ability of people to use their voice to make a point.
And I think you said you had a second thing?
Well, the first thing was the field trip, and the second thing was this Instagram, the voice of people feeling empowered to actually say what they feel and what they mean, and to call out individuals and institutions, across the board.
And I would say that's happening at the university level, like institutions broadly too, because I've been in a couple of really interesting meetings in terms of panic around like the old guard and the new school, and thinking about how to push that stuff out. And I think that's a big, large conversation. I think for me, it's really exciting because I've been doing the work. I was laughing. We had this other live talk, and I was like, it came out of my mouth, and I was like, well, some of us have been doing this work for over 20 years, and some of us on the shoulders of other people have been doing that for even longer. And so, it's fun to think about, for me, especially all the training and mentorship that goes into mentoring BIPOC students to become new cultural workers into the field and scholars into the field. And it's like really exciting to see the push and just the no fear. And I think it doesn't surprise me. I think it makes me so happy and so proud, in a way of like feeling that contribution that a bunch of us have been working really hard to get to that point to do. And I think that Yeah, it's surprising, but it's also fulfilling at the same time. And then all of a sudden you're getting all these emails and calls. Can you help me? Can you do this? And I know that when the Canada Council also said that, we're looking at boards now, and if you don't have diversity on your boards, and a couple of boards coming, Heather would make jokes and I would make jokes. They just like paste your bio and be like, "Dear Julie, you seem great. Could we have you on your board?" And you're just like, no thanks, no thanks. So I think that that's, the fact is that now people are being called out on that, and that's public. And I think that that's, a tough blow. But for me, I think that it's also a really good opportunity for us to seize the work that we've been pushing and pushing and pushing for, that we have a bigger platform in positions of power, and to be able to keep pushing the bigger institutions and the next level of positions of power to say, we demand this. Look at what the world's asking for. Look at where we're going to. And then the more people that have access to education and opportunity and empowerment, the world will shift, and we're seeing it, and it's going to continue to shift. I'd say the other thing that gets me excited is the need for, I had sort of mentioned it earlier, the archival aspect of what digital can do. And so, another festival, the Singapore Night Festival, had reached out because of the work with Nuit, Blanche, and they also had a kind of a scholarly engagement with the festival. And they're at about 14 years. They've had to cancel. They wanted to have a conversation about what we were going to be thinking about to do with the current climate. And so we had talked a lot about the need for archive, and that idea of like not just a literal, like just a plain, we did this year, this happened this year, but an actual engagement with audience and archive. And I think that that's something that you can do, because I think what happens with these kind of large scale events is we go to them, we embody them, we experience them, and then there's no ephemeral, there's no traces left after of those moments. And I think that, because similarly to what Devyani and Gaëtane said, you now actually have the resources in terms of, you now can understand what is possible in the digital realm. You have your whole team behind you to try and figure out what we could do. And just how you said you mobilized, you thought you'd get a few institutions, it was over 60, people are hungry for it. And so it's that kind of opportunity to take that moment and take advantage of the fact that you're kind of sitting still, and that you can do some of that really important work that you've been wanting to do, and that you have the opportunity to do it. And I think that the more that we can archive all of that and have people engaged in that again speaks to the new generation of people that keep coming up into the cultural sector that are able to access all that information.
I think that's an excellent point, and it's really nice to be able to seeing, as you say, these experiences that are more temporal and ephemeral, that we have artifacts there that and accessible artifacts, that they're not physically locked in a bin in some basement somewhere that we can't ever get to, right? And we can access them on our own time and at our own pace for research. Devyani, I'm going to turn to you now. What has surprised you from the process?
And I feel like it can be, and I don't want to be repetitive or take up space, and we can go to another question, but it is the power of this moment of reckoning. And for me, I'm not even talking about the surprise within my own team, our own AGO content. I'm talking about all the essays that have come out over the last week, cross-sectorally, in journalism, by BIPOC leaders, in the arts. I think voice, as Gaëtane said, is what's been the most amazing. So it's not only our own kind of cultural production in terms of programs or Nuit or the fall season, it's just people speaking and speaking really loud. I think what I've been thinking about a lot is just, is that leading to a tipping point? And I don't know if I don't know. I feel like I'm unclear, even though there's been so much expression by artists, by thinkers, by the next generation. I think we're definitely in a bit of a power struggle right now, and a very real one in culture. And I'm just trying to be zen and watch as it unfolds. But the reckoning has been the most interesting thing.
That's interesting, because it ties back into the adapting value, right? And the question of who prescribes what has value and what doesn't, right? And who gets to speak out there. Are you okay if I plug your essay? Too late now. Yeah, so for everyone watching, Devyani has just very recently released a very wonderful piece of commissioned writing on her experience as a BIPOC leader at one of the top institutions in the country, or largest institutions in the country. You can find that at the website of Patel Brown. So let's shift now to one of our final questions here before we take in audience questions. It was interesting this morning because I was giving a bit of a welcome address, and I talked about this being a safe space for safe conversation that can happen here, an honest conversation. And then our keynote, Dr. Anthony Schrag, came on after, and he said, you know, I picked up on that. And he's like, you know what I prefer is dangerous conversation. We should be having conversations that, you know, are making us uncomfortable and are more dangerous in that way. So I think these are two sides of one coin. But let's start with question number 4. What can we, as we move forward, what can we safely leave behind? Julie's laughing. She's reaching for the mic.
I'm really brutal. I'm like, the bullshit. I'm just like, all of it. I'm happy to like, see you later. Like, I just think in my mind, I'm just like, I'm so tired. Like, we had an incredible panel at the Canadian Arts Summit, and I just felt like, you know, we just smashed it in terms of the kind of dialogue and conversation that was happening. Gaëtane was part of that panel, Carrie Swanson, Sharon Paul, Rupia. And I just like, after, it was so patronizing because all these people would come up and almost like pat you on the back, like, oh, you're so articulate, you did such a good job. And I just think in my head, I'm like, I'm so exhausted of it. So I would just love to leave that all behind and push through. And I hope that what Devyani says doesn't come true. Like, I hope the reckoning actually is the reckoning and the shift of power starts to continue to tip. And I think that that's what I like to leave behind. So that's why I was laughing when you said it. I was just like, can I just say this?
You can all say anything. We are approved. Go ahead. Yeah. Any thoughts from Gaëtane or Devyani?
Well, I mean, I remember vividly when I was invited for that panel, I told Julie, I only accepted because it was you and Carrie. And I said, I am no longer doing this. This is not why my parents raised me to do this. But I also feel a responsibility, you know, to everyone, to my people, and to everyone in general. And I do hope that, you know, and when I say hope, because we know the people in power never want to give away the power, and I hope that people really understand their role and their own individual role, whether you are a person of color or not, and especially if you're not a person of color, your own responsibility in doing the work, learning, reading, and also to say, like, I decide to embody this, you know, and it's a shared responsibility. And if we want to change the world, which I hope we do, because if we're not going to change the world, we might as well stop, right? So of course, you know, one train has left. It's not the first time that we have these conversations, you know. It's when it comes to First Nation and Indigenous people and Black people, we've been having those conversations since 1619, you know, in some way, shape, or form. And I think that people need to understand that. And I was in a talk the other day, like in a meeting, I said, you know, I'm sorry for everyone, but the people being killed now, you know, on the news are First Nation and Black people. They're the ones who suddenly, when they have whichever reason, the police feels comfortable shooting them as if this is the only solution, you know? And so I think that I feel that these are important questions, and that I hope we can really have, you know, when people think of building teams, that they check themselves and say, oh my God, Do I have Indigenous people? Do I have BIPOC people? Do I have queer people? Like, you need to make that exercise, because one might think that then our relationships are only based on race and color, but I'm sorry for people, that's how it's always been. But if you make, like, it's as if they suddenly woke up and realized that some people were always excluded. The people that were always excluded, and we recognize ourselves. And so I think that if we want a real shift, as like, I remember working with a team and looking at the layout of our annual report. And because we do programs with in some underserved areas, you know, in our Power Youth program, there were majority of people of color and Black people. And then when there was Power Kids, which is parents and their children, there were none of these, you know, Black and brown people with their kids. And I had to say, excuse me, Black, I'm a parent. I know many Black parents and brown parents or non-white parents that do take a time to go on a Sunday. And then and then my staff said, one of my staff, and they mean well, but it's about teaching. The person said, oh, there's one in the corner. I said, that's the problem. Not supposed to be in the corner. It's supposed to be front and center, just like everyone else. And now when I look at what my team produces, I no longer have to have these conversations because they've embodied it themselves, regardless of their cultural origin. And for me, the important thing is regardless of their cultural origin, because even if I would hope, you know, I have my doubts, but I would hope that even if I wasn't the director, and if the director of my institution is a white European settler descendant, whichever, that they would have flexed that muscle to say, my institution will be stronger if I have diversity around the table. And that diversity is not only about the color of your skin, because you could, you know, at times you could have a board that's majority white because people have transitioned off, but what are they supporting? Are they supporting that diversity within the team? Are they supporting the diversity within the programs? So it's not just saying everybody needs to be all colors in order to have a diverse program or in order to lead a diverse institution, but it has to be from top to bottom. And often the bottom is more woke than the top. And so people who lead have to listen to their teams, because often when you have dramas, right, as Julie was saying, being called in to meetings, if the people at the top had talked to all the levels, but talking meaning listening, really listening, and saying, okay, let's go with what you're suggesting, while fully understanding that if it blows in everybody's face, it's okay. But we have tried something, and we, meaning everyone in the organization, have been listening to each other. Then you become a team that can confront anything, because all these conversations, I'm sorry for people who are uncomfortable, they will never be perfect. We will make mistakes. We will say the wrong term. We will call somebody what they're not supposed to be called. But it's about your ability to say, hey, sorry, I did this. So can you remind me, how do I say your name properly? Write it to me in any which way you need, you know, phonetic, record it on your phone. And, you know, when I hear people not being able to say Haudenosaunee, I'm like, so, and you know, for me to say it, I practiced and practiced. And I remember asking Cheryl Lirondelle so many times, can you remind me how we say it? And now when I say it, it comes out. But it's not because I was born with the word Haudenosaunee in my tongue. It's because I made the effort. So I hope that everybody understand that this is a shared effort, that I make the effort to say Haudenosaunee properly. And if I'm not saying it right in a different area or of the country, I would hope that the nation on which land I'm walking is going to say, you know what, this is how we say our name. And that I will be listening instead of saying, oh, so sorry, I don't know how to say that. It's too hard for me. So to me, so really talking from top to bottom and listening to the staff that's also at the institution in order to have a shared vision and a shared future together.
Yeah, I've got it. Yeah, I'm thinking about the sacredness of name and the respect that it shows to people to make that effort and to simply ask. I don't think anybody's upset when, you know, someone messes up a name, but to ask what that is. The poet Susan Musgrave is adamant about naming and titling on things, because she says, no matter what you achieve in life, one of the things that will last the longest is your name, be it on a gravestone, be it passed down intergenerationally, all of those things, right? So that's all tied into identity. I want to just tag one thing and we'll come back to it, because you were talking about how your team has adapted and has embodied these changes that we've seen against anti-Black racism, anti-oppression, and various things too. So I'd like to come back and touch on whether or not that work was happening pre-COVID, or if COVID now has impacted the way that they're operating on their programming, to sort of take a deeper lens look on that. But before we do that, I'm just going to step to Devyani to speak on what she feels can safely be left behind.
I want to also clarify one thing in hope and solidarity with Julie, which is I may be sitting looking at the tipping point, but I'm not unhopeful about it. I am hopeful that this is critical mass and a moment of change, but I'm also just watching because I feel we're at that kind of at that point. Letting go. Yeah, I'm tired of the fight and the talks and the kind of bullshit, as Julie says, around power and who holds power and culture in this country, and appointments of people into leadership roles, and speaking to ourselves in an integrated way. I'd like us to be speaking and hiring from our communities to lead our institutions as well. But I also, I know this is, you know, the AGO team will probably not like me saying this, but I feel like despite all the success of what we've been programming, I'd like to let go of the idea of productivity and the kind of capitalist ethos of consumption, because we're all sitting here thinking we should be in a reflective state, or some people who can afford it in a reflective state. But the reality is most people are working harder than ever for less and losing their jobs, and we're still talking about what we consume and produce. And I don't know, I just think maybe this is the opportunity to try to move away from that ethos a little bit.
Yeah, that's an excellent point, and how this all just ties into those oppression systems, right? And capitalism, and having to be productive, and having to do the output, and that sort of condescending tone, almost in a way of we shall teach you, and here's you go. And hopefully this is cracking open some things that we can keep pushing into to sort of develop participatory, community-based, you know, as art moves away from being about, you know, object creation and more into sort of temporal, time-based community building experiments that reveal to us who we are to each other and what we could be. I think that's excellent. Gaëtane, did you have a little bit, or either of you as well, Devyani and Julie, on anything that has changed in your teams or their outlook to their creation of value online due to COVID and the anti-racism pieces that have been affecting everyone?
I think that Julie wanted to intervene on the point before.
Yeah, I did. Thanks, Gaëtane, because I just wanted to pick up on what you were saying, and I think it's so important to be humble. So for those of you that know me well, I mispronounce names from my own territory, my own space, my own place. It's not my mother tongue. It's just like, and it takes hard work. And especially when we do the kind of large international stuff, you know, if I don't introduce or say welcome in Maori, you know, those feelings are hurt. Do you know what I mean? And I think rightfully so. And I think that, you know, if we think about it, and I know that for me, it is it's a challenge in terms of my ability to be able to do that work, but I continue to push through, and I continue to try and do it, even though everybody usually laughs, you know, and I get a good chuckle out of the crowd. But I just feel like at the end of the day, it's worth the work, you know? And I just think that that's so important. And I think people need to be reminded that there's no like perfect pedestal position where nobody has to do the work, where nobody's not learning, where people's lives aren't being transformed, or that we're constantly in this kind of reciprocal or even a push and pull. It's like we have to work really hard at doing that. And so when we try to do that work, people see that and they see that effort and they are more forgiving and they're willing to teach you if you ask those questions, right? And I just think that that's so critical, especially as we move forward and as our world becomes more and more global and people move through spaces and we learn about different people in different places and how to say those names properly. I mean, I've been traveling, I'm not to pick on New Zealand, but Maori's hard. And it's like, I've been traveling there since 2011 and I'm now starting to hear the sounds the way that I need to. And it took a long time, but I'm happy for it. I feel better and I feel more connected when I go to that place or when I engage with those people. And it's going to be the same thing within Canada in the context of I'm always learning. And I think that that's humbling.
So Jennifer, do you want me to answer that question about whether the work had started before COVID?
Yeah, in terms of teams or you know, like when we're talking about broadly about value online, right? If you've noticed a shift or an opening in some way or an increase in learning that's come about from all of these cracks in the system and oppressive systems that COVID has highlighted for everyone.
I mean, for within our case, the power plant, because I only want to talk about that, is that, but I would say it's the same for my role at the TAC in terms of organization. It's like that work had been done before. So we, in terms of, one thing that I found very interesting is that, you know, some of our patrons who are not people of color, you know, mentioned to us how, in view of the situation in which we are living now, they really felt that as patrons of the power plant, they were already prepared for those shifts because through the exhibition and the programs we had been doing over the last 8 years, you know, these were common themes that they had seen through the works of artists and through our programming also. So I would say that our team has always been a team. I mean, as we've grown together, regardless of shifts and changes of staff, but it has become part of the culture of the institution to be mindful that when we're proposing like artists to do, to engage with the gallery, that we would be mindful to say, oh my God, we need to make sure that there's people of color and from different areas of the city, also different age groups, you know, so that you're not only thinking of emerging artists, but you're thinking of more senior artists, younger, like, you know, those barriers that those silos that we put for towards each other, we try to break them continuously. And I've seen this in the way heightened, of course, in the digital way, because you have to, in a certain sense, program in a different manner, and you have to be calculating more because the number of events you do might be, you know, more succinct than allowing people in the gallery. So if within the last 2 months, the only effective engagement with the gallery is only through digital, you want to make sure that what you've brought forward, you know, did represent that diversity. And in order, this was not the time to start force feeding staff about what is right or wrong to do. And that's where you see the strengths of the organizations, the ones that had already started doing that work before, maybe not perfectly, but we're ready to engage with the moment and to see that reflected in their core values through their online, you know, participation and engagement.
Sorry, I missed you, Julie, on that last piece. Devyani, did you want to pop in on this one?
Yeah, I just think, I mean, I'm relatively new to the AGO. It's been 2+ years, but I mean, there's been many people in that space doing a lot of that work for a long time. You know, going back through curatorial and programming in other areas. And I think one has to acknowledge that. So I feel, though, that a lot of the adaptability and a lot of the last 2 weeks has been about being responsive in meaningful ways. And Audrey Hudson, our curator around school programs, has just led to 2 panels with community around anti-Black racism. Wanda, myself, and Tanya Talaga spoke just after Black Tuesday and discussed the kind of the reactions to this moment as well. So I think there's been a lot about responsiveness in conversation, but by no ways is it new in terms of COVID. It has been happening for years, mostly through individuals and their passions. And I'm thinking of Cyrus Marcus Ware and his tenure at the AGO. So I don't think we can discount that history, but the last 2 weeks has definitely been about stepping up and being responsive.
Thank you. We have about 5 minutes left. Shall we turn to a couple of audience questions? All right, I'll throw out the first one here, and we'll see who wants to take a chew on it. So how has what you consider success changed for an event as it has shifted to digital?
Can I just jump in on this? I know I just spoke.
Oh,
it's so funny because we just got off a meeting with our web team, and I mean, to be honest, we're still collecting data. And I'm thinking, what is success? Is success numbers of views? Is success engagement after the fact? Is success an artist and a speaker enjoying and feeling enriched, and an audience member feeling they've learned something? I don't know. I tend to the latter, even if there's 50 people. And I had the pleasure of speaking to Rajni Pereira recently, and I know she felt very enriched. I felt very fortunate and enriched by our conversation, as did audience members who were engaging through the chat group. If 10 people had attended that to me is a success. But in terms of how institutions are measuring success, I don't think we know yet. I mean, we know numbers, but is it length of view? Is it how many people on Facebook Live in the moment versus 4,000 over the next 24 hours? I'm thinking about it a lot. What I'm saying is I don't know, but I think it's about individuals being fed.
Julie or Gaëtane, do you have thoughts on this?
I would say the same thing as Devyani, really. I did an event, and also sometimes, depending on the time of the day when you do the event, there might not be so many people that day, but then you put it, on YouTube, and then suddenly, after a few weeks, you see so many people. So for me, it becomes an elastic notion, and again, all of this is going to shift depending on what are the business models that we impose on ourselves in terms of measuring success. And that is an unknown factor, which I think will be harder for bigger institutions than smaller, nimble institutions that have never functioned on the same scale of success because of their structure. It's not that one is better than the other. It's just those are different models because of different structures.
Yeah, I think it's interesting too, because it's giving places a chance to sort of have a review of what different types of bottom lines are out there and what are we considering as capital. And so it's not always about the dollar, right? It can be about other things, but it's a very interesting time to sort of try and delineate what those things are. Is it community engagement? How do you measure those different impacts? So we have, I think, another question here. Gabby has asked, what do you think dictates people's interest in online events? And what contributes to the ebb and flow of people being motivated to engage with them? Big question.
I think for me, it's community engagement. So for me, it's the same reason, we all joked and said, oh yeah, we're happy to be with this group of people and we're excited to have this kind of dialogue. And that to me is about building community and capacity. So I'm less interested. I don't have a lot of extra time. I've got two little people that demand a lot of time, and especially now with homeschooling, it's next level. And so I think in my head, I do have screen fatigue. So I'm very selective of what I choose and what I don't choose. And sometimes you have regret. It's the same thing when you go out in public spaces pre-COVID. You have to be selective of what you have energy for and what you don't. And I think that for me, it's about building community and capacity. And so I just think there are people that I'm working with that I want to continue to work with. I want to broaden that circle and include more people and have really intense and interesting and funny dialogues. And I just think for me, that's what fills me. So that is what I want to be. And that doesn't matter if that's online or in person. For me, it has to fill me in a way that I get excited about. So.
Very well said. Yeah, Gaëtane's like, I have nothing, and that was it. All right. Yeah, no, it was beautifully said. Yeah, thank you. Did you anyone have any last thoughts or comments?
I think we're sorry, Julie, I didn't want to actually say anything after you said that. But where we're going is what is the hybrid, like what we're thinking about in the AGO is reopening to members and access pass holders on the 2nd and the public on the 23rd. And what is the hybrid of what is online and what potentially is in public space again? And again, we're designing it and figuring out in real time, and it's really creative and also challenging because no one has lived through this before. So I'm curious to see who enters the space in the next 4 weeks. How many people do come? How do they engage? And then what do we offer in the virtual world versus in front of a work of art? So the next month is going to be interesting.
Yeah, I'd like to second that. I think that, for many years, institutions have been talking about capacity building and community building. And I think now that the access to the work we do and the spaces we work in has been reduced, how will people, when people have the choice, will they choose us, like in terms of priority of places to be? And that's will teach us something about whether our work has really penetrated into people's psyche, or if there's still more work to be done.
I just want us to take a quick picture before we have to depart so we can have our ephemeral, so it's, there's a documentation of it. So I want everybody to smile here quick. There we go. Yay. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. So
I'll send it to you guys. I'll send it to you guys.
Thank you. Yeah, so I think we're just about on time. It's been a fantastic discussion, and we had one other question, but it's a big one to chew on, but it's very interesting. It just ties into what we were wrapping up. So I'm just going to put it out into the ether and we'll leave it there. But someone has asked, if a sense of community is important, should organizations moving forward reduce their online presence and replace it with traveling performances and exhibitions instead? Those are big questions, and I know you're all doing a lot of that work already with traveling and with moving exhibitions physically, but we're welcome to keep taking questions and to keep engaging with these fantastic experts who've joined us here today. Thank you from the bottom of my heart to all three of you. It's been fantastic and a wonderful learning experience, and it's been my pleasure to be sitting here with you. Thank you.
Thank you. It was nice seeing everyone. Thank you so much for joining in.
Thank you for having us. Bye-bye.
Thank you for being with us. And I also want to say special thanks for just from me personally for addressing the issue of the right way of pronouncing people's names, because I'm also an immigrant. I just came here less than a year ago, and I know this issue from both sides, so that how it feels when your name is mispronounced and how it feels when your name is pronounced correctly, and that's really great. And also, trust me, I spent yesterday the whole day just studying the names for today's and tomorrow's session, so it's doable. Let's do that. It's really worth it. Thank you so much. So now I think we're going to the last break for today. It will take us 15 minutes. And then we will meet Amanda, who will also